Hello and welcome to the American Ultra Stock channel. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If this is your first time around, well, buckle up. It's a very controversial topic. You see it right behind Braden. It's the Indy 11 stadium or proposed stadium. In the wake of the news about, the city's mayor looking for a possible MLS expansion site, we're going to be discussing ultimately MLS and USL. Is MLS trying to do good for soccer? Are they just money hungry? We're going to be discussing the structure of both leagues and ultimately our personal takes on this. Straight away, Braden, just bridging us towards the news. How do you feel about Indy 11 possibly going out of existence, kind of like a San Diego Loyal?
So I'll just start with the basics of the situation. The Indianapolis mayor has decided, after some talks with MLS and Don Garber, to pull the funding. Well, it's not him, but they've convinced the investment group who was funding the new Indy 11 $1 billion stadium, which you can see the rendering for behind me. They decided to pull the funding from it in anticipation of potentially building a different new stadium for a potential MLS expansion team in a bid to, get an expansion team. We've seen expansion teams be added a lot recently in San Diego, St. Louis, Miami, lots of places. And basically, this has gone behind everyone's backs. This was completely unexpected, especially since, from an Indy 11 perspective, I think their end goal of making this stadium, it would have been the nicest by far in USL, and especially for a soccer-specific stadium. It doesn't even compare to the rest of the clubs in the USL Championship. I do truly think the end goal for Indy 11 in this whole project was actually to become the MLS team, like we saw with FC Cincinnati several years ago when they ended up making the jump from USL to MLS. I think that was the end goal. So it just really doesn't make sense why the mayor would do this, especially since there is no guarantee that Indianapolis is going to be awarded an expansion team. I think eventually maybe they will, because I think we'll get more into it later on our takes on the video on the league. But I think MLS is looking to expand as much as they can. Right now they're up against Detroit and Tampa Bay, coincidentally two other cities that have popular USL teams. Not really much of a coincidence, to be honest, but those are the three main contenders for the next expansion team. Detroit is definitely a bigger market, and I think Tampa Bay is a bigger soccer market. So I don't know if Indianapolis is even going to win it, which potentially puts at risk the club, Indy 11, that you already have, the only professional club in the area, for an outside chance at an MLS team. It's a despicable decision by the mayor and by everyone involved, but that's just the initial reaction to that, and that's the whole situation.
Yeah, I think it would have been such a big win for USL to have a soccer-specific stadium like that in the league. It would have been amazing, really. But you mentioned about the cities that the MLS is studying to move into. We saw a really nice about the MLS expansion sides and where they think is the most strategic area to go to. It's always a USL club city. And again, let's just remind ourselves the way that MLS is structured. They are not like USL, which is like NFL and the other leagues, which is franchise based. No, they have it's completely centered. The unit. So Don Garber, they say that it's for more stability, but all of the decisions do run through them, and they have a lot of control, a grip on the league. Really, what do you think about that structure, Braden? And do you think that ultimately, with this approach that they have, moving into these cities, that, for quite frankly, gather all of the interest from casuals or people that don't know the sport. They create a fan base and then they just move in with an expansion side. What do you think the end goal would be for MLS? Your take on it, and do you think it is more detrimental than beneficial for the sport in the US?
Listen, I don't think there's anyone who can deny that the end goal for MLS is to be the sole owner and control the pyramid. I'll say that with quotation marks because it's not a pyramid. There's no promotion relegation, but the soccer structure in the United States. They're very strategically picking out these expansion cities that already have USL teams to come in and, like you said, take the interest. The USL teams, they build that connection with the fans in the city. They build the interest in the sport, and then MLS comes in, buys their way in, $500 million, and they get an MLS team, steals all the fans because there's actually something they can compete for. The whole point of having a pyramid, like basically every footballing country has, is so that clubs that are at the lower levels have a chance to go up and be at the top levels, which gathers interest from the fans. If a club can just stay at their own level, they can win their own league, that's cool. But if you're winning a second tier league and there's no really prize for it besides bragging rights and a small trophy, there's nothing really to incentivize playing for that club or supporting that club as a fan. And when a first-tier team comes in, like we've seen in several cities, I already mentioned San Diego, St. Louis, Miami, the fans obviously flock to the MLS team, and understandably so, because there's something on the line. They can qualify for more competitions. They can play against higher levels of talent. There's now Leagues Cup that was created for MLS and Liga MX, where they can play against the best teams from Mexico, obviously CONCACAF Champions Cup. And because of this, the better players sign for their clubs as well. So overall, the whole pyramid structure is designed to give MLS an advantage, and there's nothing USL can really do about it besides just try to build up their smaller markets that will inevitably be taken away by some rich owner coming in and buying that first division spot, which is 100% not how it should be.
Absolutely. It's a very old topic. I mean, everybody made a video about it at some point about pro rel. And I'm not going to be playing right here as the devil's advocate, but I will say that, in my opinion, when USL postponed their decision to at least announce that they would be implementing pro rel, that was a huge loss for them as well. I don't know if they got hopeful when they got the ESPN deal that maybe that was a sign that they could keep exactly. Well, they are franchise based, but they also do require a huge fee to be entered in their pyramid, which again is not really a pyramid. It's flat. If you win USL 2, you stay there. So it's kind of similar. I think that they have the structure to eventually implement it. They have the clubs and they have different leagues and divisions, but it's not like MLS Next Pro where it's just the same club. But then again, I'd imagine that they really should have implemented that. And I would like to ask you, do you think that, well, USL kind of has established themselves with that way, the way that they work. If they were to implement it, it would be a lot easier. They said it was postponed due to logistics. Some people rumored that it was because of votes of owners that, again, paid higher fees to join USL Championship. And then MLS, on the other hand, has MLS Next Pro, which is just for development, but they don't really have a second division. Just keep adding clubs and clubs right and left. Do you think it's sustainable for a league to have what's MLS goal, to have 40 clubs? Do you think they will eventually add pro rel? And what do you think about USL not implementing it, or just having a say on that? Say that they're going to implement in 2026. No, they just postponed it entirely.
Yeah, so I'll start with the USL pro rel side of things here. I think there's a lot of concerns within USL about the pro rel, and understandably so. The owners, and we've had this conversation about MLS clubs as well. When the owners, we'll use MLS as an example. When the owners pay $500 million, that was the fee for San Diego FC, who will be joining next season. When they pay that much money, and then as an expansion team, obviously they're at a disadvantage in terms of competitiveness. Obviously they have the means to go sign players and be competitive in their first couple of seasons, like we saw with Atlanta United, like we saw with LAFC. But there's also a very real possibility that they could initially start as a really bad team. We saw FC Cincinnati win 3 wooden spoons in a row, finish bottom of the table for 3 years in a row. Obviously now they're a great team, but if promotion and relegation had existed back then, they'd be back down to USL where they were before initially joining MLS. And the reality is, we see the financial situation with some USL clubs. The owners, and unjustifiably so, would not want to spend that much money to be granted an expansion team into MLS just to then drop down a level the very next year and then basically see their investment wasted. That's really the big problem here. And I think part of it, in a lesser extent, because it costs a lot less money to join USL, the financial losses from going to Championship to League One are a lot less. It's a lot less of a gap than it would be from MLS to USL Championship. But the same concerns do still exist. At the end of the day, these clubs are businesses, and the owners have to make the financial decisions that they think is right. And as well as the logistics, I do think that there are a lot more. The pyramid that they have, or the system they have, is a lot better set up for pro rel than MLS is. Obviously, they don't have enough clubs in MLS to start that unless it was going to be a first year with USL lower. But the whole system that they have, it could be improved a lot. USL League 2 is basically used for college players in their off season. There's obviously players who just play there full time, or I guess part time for them, because they don't really make that much money at that level. But for the majority of the players in the clubs there, it's used for college players to stay fit in their off season, and you see a lot of roster turnover. So League 2 was out of the picture to begin with for pro rel. When they did have that discussion, they didn't even consider League 2. It was just Championship and League 1. But then you get into the issue of the league size. USL League 1 is a very small league. It only has, I believe, 12 teams in it. So you'd have to add more. And there's other competitive leagues as well that they could reach into. We actually saw with Chattanooga FC, who used to be in, I think it was either NISA or NASL. They ended up joining MLS Next Pro. but we've seen teams like that join other leagues to remain intact and remain competitive. But the reality is, the current system that USL has, they don't have enough teams to set up a pyramid. I think that could be very easily fixed based on the player pool that they have, especially in USL League 2. Once the players leave college, they need somewhere to play, at least if it's only part-time. I think they could definitely have enough teams for at least a 2-league pro rel format, but right now the system isn't set up for that. The problem for USL here is that if they don't set it up soon, inevitably they're going to die, because like you said, MLS has no reason to stop expanding. They want to become a monopoly, similar to the NFL with American football. They want to become the league in the country. We've seen some other startup leagues for American football that have started and tried to capitalize, especially in spring football in the off season of NFL, but most of them haven't worked. We've seen the XFL, I think, come around 3 times. It's already died out twice. They had to merge with another league, the USFL, to even stay alive this 3rd time. We'll see how that ends up going for them, but it's kind of the same situation here. MLS is going to keep expanding to the markets where USL Championship clubs are, and maybe even USL League One clubs that are historic, such as the Richmond Kickers. And they're going to keep expanding, keep getting more teams in, because there's definitely enough talent to do it. They can sign players from anywhere. They have the financial means to do so. And a salary cap ensures that all these teams remain somewhat competitive within the league. So there's always more incentive for owners to, buy up new clubs. And they're going to do that, probably reach 40 teams at some point. And if USL doesn't implement pro rel, something to bring an extra little bit of flair to their league and their system, they're inevitably going to die out.
Yeah, I was also going to say, based on the players and the type of personnel that they can attract, both leagues, obviously MLS is way above. They even use, I think the collaboration between the 2 leagues is non-existent. Apart from a few loans here and there, you can see even on interviews, they don't really rate each other. But also, I think that USL, again, doesn't do really that much justice to themselves when they don't really focus on the youth development as much as they could. I think now it's been a changing trend. I think for the past 3 or 4 years, they have been a lot better about investing in youth and bridging that gap as well with Europe, sending some players over there. But also, I want to ask you, the biggest things that you think are the attractive of USL and the biggest ones for MLS. I would just say off the bat, for me, it's something that's so simple as Lukaku said, really. Just the kids being different, not being, again, since it's a franchise-based league, they have the liberty to go around and choose. And again, it creates a little bit more disparity, if you want to say, if a club has more of a following. But again, it follows the trend of how the sport really is played across the globe.
Yeah, I'll start with something that you said as a negative, and I'll rebut it a little bit. I think one thing that's great about at least USL Championship this year is that they have implemented a rule where the home club has 2 more extra roster spots on the bench that are only allowed to be used for academy players, which is giving a lot more chances to these young players who come out through their academies. USL academies are a lot smaller. Some clubs don't even have fully fledged academy systems, and the ones that do usually play within the MLS next system because that's where all the best talent is. So they're kind of trapped by MLS in that aspect, but we've seen a lot of clubs, Birmingham Legion, Oakland Roots, I think being the main 2, but we've seen so many others as well that have given these opportunities to young players because of this new rule. They're allowed to have players in, they can take risks on some of their academy products, and it pans out. We've seen Oakland Roots, I'll use an example, in Open Cup. They started basically a fully fledged second team in their last Open Cup game, a bunch of youth players, and a 19-year-old came in extra time and scored the winner for them. So I think this youth system that they have implementing now is really one of the biggest aspects of this league. Like you said, the kits are always nice, but I think another aspect is the fact that they kind of draw into the hometown crowd. It's a smaller league. Everyone wants to cheer for the underdog, and especially when these teams come up against the bigger teams like they used to do in Open Cup, there was a lot of hype generated when they beat the MLS teams in Open Cup. It's a huge win for the club, and that's another reason why MLS decided to pull out of Open Cup, because they want to deny every single opportunity from USL clubs to gather hype and get recognition, because ultimately MLS has no reason to be in Open Cup. They play each other. It's more fixture congestion, like they said, even though they just created a whole new tournament to effectively replace Open Cup for them. there's no reason for them to be in it from a business perspective, which is why they decided to back out. Now, U.S. soccer needs to grow a pair, to be honest, and step in. MLS effectively controls the entire U.S. Soccer Federation, which is horrible for USL because not only is it letting them get away with stuff like disrespecting the most historic and longest standing tradition of soccer in our country, like the US Open Cup, it's also preventing opportunities for USL to become a first division league. We saw it with the women's league that is about to be implemented called the USL Super League. They were granted first division status, but USL, the men's league, hasn't had that yet. The pro standards that they have within USSF make it very, very hard for USL to be granted first division status. And it also, another aspect of it, we've mentioned so many USL clubs that have died because of MLS teams coming in or just due to lack of funding. A lot of the times that this happens in England and other countries as well, but England, there's so many examples of this since their pyramid is so extensive. When financial issues happen for their clubs, they go into administration and the fans take over and the fans make the club survive. You can't do that in US. If you want to be a first division team, you can't really have majority supporter ownership, or it just won't be sustainable, which is why another reason why USL hasn't been granted first division status, and another reason why USL is basically behind MLS in every aspect.
Absolutely. I think we touched most of the topics that float around between these two leagues that we can fit at least in a video without it being eternal, because as you guys know, it's really nice to talk about these topics. Before we go, I just wanted to ask you, Braden, do you think that ultimately will there ever be a merger between these leagues? I have a hot take. I think it will eventually happen, but 60 years from now. I think it will take a long time from now, only when the sport has grown a culture with the country. These clubs have survived MLS, or USL clubs have grown in infrastructure, or sent a player to Europe that was historic. So I think it can only happen in 50, 60 years from now, but maybe sometime soon. Do you think it will ever happen?
Honestly, if that's how long it takes for a fully fledged promotion relegation system in the US with multiple tiers, 3, 4 different league systems, I would 100% take that. But in my opinion, I don't think that's ever going to happen. We've seen, I've mentioned a couple of times already, MLS's main goal right now is to kill USL so they can have a fully fledged monopoly on the sport in the US. And they've been pretty successful so far. So many clubs at every level of USL have died, whether it's due to an MLS team coming in or just financial issues that you see in every country with lower league clubs. I don't think a merger will ever happen because MLS has their own goals. Maybe a couple of USL teams will come into MLS. We've already seen that happen. I keep using FC Cincinnati as an example, but there's a bunch as well. I think a third of the teams in MLS right now have been in USL at some point in some shape or form. Some of them have rebranded or they have the same owner, but they're a new club, like what's happening in St. Louis. But a lot of the teams coming from USL, and I think we could see some of the most popular USL teams come into MLS at some point, like Louisville City. If that's the only option for them, they'll probably have to do it. If it's either MLS or die, I think a lot of the clubs will decide to join MLS. And I think some of them, like Louisville, like potentially Tampa Bay Rowdy, Sacramento Republic, will have the option and the opportunity to join MLS. So somewhat of a merger there, maybe, but I don't think the league will ever be merged. MLS has tried to buy USL in the past, but at this point, I think they've seen that what they're doing is working. They're going to kill it off eventually if it keeps going like this. In my opinion, USL is ultimately in the long run screwed unless they can implement Pro-Rel, because that's the only thing that they would have going for them over MLS. I already mentioned all the things that MLS has over USL. Right now, there's not a single thing for USL besides maybe advantage of the smaller markets. But like I said, MLS is just going to come in, expand, and basically take over those markets. So unless USL can implement Pro-Rel at some point, I think they're ultimately, maybe it's not now, maybe it's not soon, maybe it's like you said in 50, 60 years. But I think ultimately USL will die out. A merger won't happen because MLS doesn't need it. It'll only be USL. And like you said, they don't seem to like each other at all for pretty obvious reasons. There's no reason for MLS to help USL, buy them, and save some of their clubs.
Absolutely, and it's going to work. The tactic of killing off a club, I mean, I've seen it right now. I'm a San Diego native. I have a lot of friends in San Diego, and a lot of the loyal fans, they were not so loyal. They quickly switched up to SDFC. understandably so. They like the sport. The Loyal wasn't there for too long. They didn't do anything historic. So a lot of people are buying into and the marketable skills as well of some of the USL clubs. I can tell from the Loyal. It was very, very bad and didn't really attract the masses. SDFC is trying to do that with their Chrome Ball tours, and it's working. And the Loyal will be completely vanished from history, really, as they are already seized. But also the fan base will quickly turn over to San Diego FC. But thank you very much, Braden. Thank you guys for watching. Let us know in the comments below, what do you think about this discussion? Would you like to have more for us to produce more content on USL? I personally really like it. We had some videos in the past. We can leave the link in the description below where they did really well. Some of you guys really enjoyed the talk. And yep, thank you very much. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, share with your friends, and we'll see you next time.